hoping that this particular talk is equal parts fascinating and frustrating. Fascinating, because I'm hoping this is the first time that you've really heard someone talk about agentic revenue, and you're like wondering what that means and what that is. But frustrating in that if I do my job right at the end of this, it should just feel so obnoxiously obvious that this is the way we should be running our back office, and this is the end. It's not the future, it's an inevitability that's come for some and will be here for most. So this is my goal. But I want to start, I know we're all pretty well versed on AI, talk of the town. I know we're starting to talk about agents and agentic sort of workflows a little bit more, but I wanted to just set the quick stage. This won't be a 101 talk, but what is an agent? It is, in my definition, nothing more than an automated workflow. And our businesses are ripe with workflows, where we're flowing with workflows. We might be overflowing with workflows, but they exist in every single business. And then a workflow is just a human-powered life cycle. Now, life cycles exist all throughout our businesses. We have the customer life cycle, we have the contract life cycle, we have what I think is the most important one, the revenue life cycle, because I think we can do the greatest work, we can hire the greatest talent, but at the end of the day, if that check doesn't clear, if that money doesn't come in, everything falls apart. So how do we start to automate that part of the life cycle? Because what's happening right now in AI, everything's moving fast, everything's getting automated, everything has an agentic solution to it, but this is one of the ones where the contract to cash gap is the last unmodernized workflow. What I mean is I'm talking about everything from the moment that prospect is ready to be called a customer because they said yes, to the second that those funds hit the account and we can start to recognize that revenue. Everything in between there, and I'm willing to take the bet that for almost every single person in this room, it's a superhuman powered project right now. And I'm willing to bet you use some combination of this current workflow. So as soon as that customer does say yes, somebody somewhere jumps in, this is gonna hopefully sound super familiar to all of you, but somebody jumps into something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and you draft up that contract. You've got a number of templates that you're using, and you find the service agreement that matches the project that you're about to sell. Then you're gonna put it in PandaDocs or DocuSign. We'll talk more about getting you off of that later. And then you're gonna send that out for signature. And then once it's fully executed, somebody takes that executed document, sends it to somebody in finance or operations, and then they go and make an invoice, manually, generally, and then they go and send that invoice out for payment, and then net 30 comes and goes, and then somebody has to manually go knock on a door and remind them kindly that the payment's due. And that's probably how it all works internally here. Now, when we talk about this is ripe for agents. This is where they thrive. This is where AI thrives. In the mundane, in the connected tissue of what is just what should be one seamless workflow, but is today fragmented across 4 different platforms, 4 different services, usually 4 different teams. Somebody in legal, somebody in sales, somebody in finance, somebody in operations. Sometimes it's operations, sales, and finance all going to track down that payment. Another thing I would be willing to take a bet on is not one person in any one of your organizations wants to create an invoice, wants to track down payments, right? Like that's a mundane task where it really gets in the way of the talent we have, right? Like they're really good and specialized at doing the thing that we hired them for. And then every moment and every second that they don't get to do that thing, like let's just make it really easy and trivial, a salesperson. Every second they're not closing a new sale because they're getting contracts sent over to finance or they're tracking down payments from a customer that hasn't paid yet. Like that's bad for revenue. So those things. So it is more, how do we put the agents to work on the mundane back office tasks? And then how do we start to make ourselves move faster? So it's not that like AI is quicker, faster, smarter, better than us. It's how do we get to do more of the thing that we are specialized and talented at doing. So this is our premise. Revenue starts with a signature, right? At the end of that signature on the contract, almost every single time somebody has to pay somebody money. But something really special happens in a contract specifically. So some interesting things that we learned when we started Agree is the number one person who sends a contract for signature in a company is not a lawyer, it's a sales rep, and that's a sales contract. But what makes a sales contract different than any other legal document is that it contains payment and billing information. And these are just data points, right? And when you think about AI, AI is a lot like the telephone, another great, amazing innovation and technology that has changed all of our lives. We all have one in our pocket right now. But when you invent the first telephone, it's the most useless invention ever until there's a second telephone. And AI is also the most useless invention ever unless there's data, right? And then now this is the question to ask yourselves as you start to have the agentic conversation, the AI conversation. Where does the data live? What kind of data do you have? And then how are you harnessing that data to make your teams more efficient? Now, one of the things that's interesting about a sales contract versus all other legal documents is the data that's contained in it. Who pays who? How much they pay? Net 30, net 45. Is there an upfront? Is there a discount? What are the ramifications for paying late? Is there an escrow? What holds the escrow? What releases the escrow? Is there a schedule? What are the line items? What are the goods or services being provided? They all exist in that document. And if we harness those items out of the document, we can start to do something like have more autonomous or generative or agentic invoices. And this is the moment where you say, oh, all of those data points, they're just variables, but they're the exact same variables you need to generate an invoice, right? Who pays who, how much they pay, net 45, net 60, what happens if it's late, exact same word for word details. So this idea of manually creating an invoice almost starts to seem a little laughable. Like, why would we ever have done that when all the information was already there, ready to go, and we just needed to port from one to the other? So now we start asking ourselves, well, it's not like, why is my company not more agentic, or why is my team not more AI first or AI forward? Why was my contract not AI native? Why was my invoice not AI native? Why was my contracting tool not AI first? Was my invoicing tool not AI first? And if they were, what does that do? How does that change our back office operations? What if we can go from contract to invoice? That kind of makes sense, right? All the details are there, pull those variables, just drop them into the invoice, ready to send. But then a question again, like, why isn't the invoice smarter? Why is it relegated to this 8.5 by 11 PDF that sits in an email? Why isn't it auto-connected to your client's purchase order software? Why doesn't it auto-submit to Coupa for you? Why doesn't it have its own payment processing? Why can't I pay on the invoice? Why can't I attach a credit card or ACH wire to the invoice? Why don't I treat the invoice like I would a banking interface? Now this starts to sound a little bit more obvious again. It's like, yeah, why is my invoice traditionally 8.5 by 11 with the account routing in the bottom left corner? Like, it should be a little bit smarter, more intelligent. And so when you do that, then you start talking about, like, what happens when that invoice is late? I need to do something like revenue recovery or collections. Why are most of us knocking on doors? Why are we doing it manually? Because something interesting about how most invoicing systems work today, you get that invoice 182-B is past due, right? That's such an easy, I'm busy at a conference, I'll deal with it on Monday, right? Just such an easy ignore. But if we have context, right, and AI is powered by data in context, the context is what makes it generative. If we know the context of the original contract, then it's really a conversation between two people. Hey, Will, I'm really excited to kick off project, insert project details here. I noticed that you opened the invoice 4 days ago. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. But like, that's the better dunning, that's the better collection, where it's a conversation between two humans based on all of the historical context we have on the sales relationship itself. And those, when that happens, like, I will get to some stats in a minute, but like, that's where things start to move on the revenue side really fast. But this comes back to more like, how do we think about all the data in all the contracts, right? There's one individual contract, and that one individual contract can create that one individual invoice. The contact from that contract can go get that invoice recovered and paid very quickly. But then at aggregate, if you take all of your sales contracts and you start thinking about that aggregate data, there is more insights into the economic health of your business than any other software tool you're using, including your primary bank, because what do we know in that total aggregate? We know all open close. We know signature velocity. We know payment velocity. We know by category and segmentation who pays late, who pays fast, who pays early, who signs quicker. We know the difference between a 12% discount rate and a 14% discount rate. And if you knew the difference between those two, other than the difference being 2% and knowing, hey, I make more money if I don't give away a bigger discount, but if you looked at the aggregate speed of signature velocity on a sales rep, over the course of an entire year, and you realize that they could close some percentage of deals faster simply because they had a 2% difference in discount rate, that would fundamentally change how you think about your own discount rate. But you'd start to use sales-led data to sort of do your revenue forecasting. That's not something a lot of us do today. Some of us have it, some of us are a little bit more mature about it, but I think as we think about our data and access to data, it changes a lot. And then when I think about the whole system, right, we're all know that we need, even if we're not fully bought in, we need to be ready for thinking about how are we AI first? How are we leading in an agentic, inevitable future? I think the real question is not how is my team more AI, but like where is the AI showing up in the software tooling that I'm using? You know, ask those questions. Why aren't my invoices smarter? Why aren't my contracts more intelligent? Now, this is kind of why we built Agree. These are the numbers I'm going to leave you with. So we've got a little over 100,000 users on the platform right now, and I only say that because that affords us massive amounts of invoicing data. And so what we've seen on all of the activity so far is when you connect these dots, the median time from contract signed to invoice paid, because remember, we're connecting the contract and we're connecting the invoice, is 36 hours. Now, what I think is interesting about 36 hours, another bet that I'm willing to take within this group here, is that the average time or median time for one of your reps, sales reps, when they get the yes and they get the executed contract and they send it to finance and finance makes the invoice and they send it to the client, I bet you that takes 36 hours, if not longer. And so we should be working in a world where we're getting paid in 36 hours. We're not taking 36 hours just to ask to be paid. But all of this happens when things start to move quicker, when they're more integrated, because at the end of that DocuSign, the little checkbox that you're done, it's not done. The deal is not done till the wire hits, till the check clears, and we know that. So it's like, why would DocuSign assume it's done? And this is the last one. 99.64% of all invoices on the platform, every single invoice on the platform is paid within 10 days of its first agentic reminder. That's just because the reminder is that much better, that much more contextually aware. And it's a little bit of peer pressure, because when one human asks another human for an update on the invoice, that's a lot different than some automated transactional email telling you that an invoice is past due.